Arts. I'm currently in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I serve as Special Counsel of Complex Litigation for the Indiana Attorney General's Office.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Wong. I am a retired attorney and former judge. I'm also on the National Board of Directors for the Center for Civic Education. I live in Boise, Idaho. However, I've been to Spearfish and Sturgis many times, and when I'm not wearing the suit and tie, I'm wearing leathers.
My name is Myron Yoder. I'm the chairman of the Professional Standards and Practices Commission for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I was an educator in the Allentown School District for 37 years, where I taught we the people before I retired. And I'm anxious to hear your presentations today. And you all are?
I'm Hannah Harmon.
I'm Cade Line.
I'm Sierra Schoen.
And I'm Brady Umberger.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. So I will read the question. We have selected question number 1, and then we'll give you time for your opening statement. In 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Never in history of this nation have so many people been arrested for the cause of freedom and human dignity. What lessons can be learned from the Children's March in Birmingham, Alabama? What is civic engagement, and what is the significance of it in American history? What responsibility, if any, do schools have to promote civic engagement?" You may begin.
The Children's Crusade was a nonviolent civil disobedient act involving over 1,000 students in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. Images from this event reached media attention throughout the world due to the development of television, showing the glaring problem of segregation and racism in America. The decision to use children, however, to get their point across did not come lightly. They had tried many conventional ways to make a change, including civil disobedience in the form of sit-ins. The necessity for change, however, caused them to finally do something drastic. The media attention that this march gained jump-started the civil rights movement, teaching everyone the power and the advantage the media can have.
Civic engagement allows people to make a difference in their community. It requires people to understand and know what is going on in their nation. And our civil rights, such as freedom of speech, assembly, and the right to vote, allow engagement. People are active in town hall meetings, community organizations, and volunteerism. Alex de Tocqueville even teaches that in order for our democratic republic to work, we must be involved and educated.
One form of civic engagement, civil disobedience, has affected movements in profound ways throughout history. It is and has been used as a tool for marches and movements across the world. Examples of this type of civic engagement were used in movements including the civil rights, the women's rights, and the student involvement in the Vietnam War protests. Many groups and movements use civil disobedience to gain media attention to get their voices heard. When people use this type of civic engagement, it's usually not the first option used before they take this direct action.
Many forms of social media allow people of even our home state of South Dakota to be informed and active in debates going on nationwide and close to home, such as our recent attention towards the House Bill 1057, where they proposed a change in the health care for transgender minors. Many students then reached out to their representatives on social media to voice their concerns and to shoot down the bill.
We see that many lessons were learned from the Children's Crusade. People observed that in order to make big changes, big risks must sometimes be taken, as desperation for truly deserved rights brought them to a risky direct action. While we don't see children in the streets trying to make a difference, we see them doing new things. Movements including the LGBTQ and Me Too have been recognized on many platforms. Students are engaged in these movements through social media, protests, and rallies. Drastic civil disobedience isn't as common today, and people try to get involved in different ways, but sometimes those different ways may not be enough.
Movements such as the one involving Greta Thunberg show how students and young people are involved in issues around the world. She highlights the issue of climate change and uses social media to get that point across. In addition, Mr. Beast, a famous YouTuber, has an environmental fundraiser. As these people tend to be appealing to the younger generations, it allows us to have a voice in issues and get involved in new, modern ways. Because of this innovation, we would argue that civic engagement hasn't died, but instead evolved to become more efficient, expansive, and safe. However, we recognize that it still isn't the same as face-to-face interaction.
This is why we believe that schools should present more opportunities for civic engagement to show students what true civic involvement is. One important area of civic engagement is that most schools use is community service. When using this, it's essential to make it something students want to do rather than make it forced. Community service should be a willing sacrifice of time, and requiring students to help out in the community may take away from their focus on academics, especially if they're in sports or have after-school jobs. Introducing community service to younger generations is a great way to bring the act of sacrificing time to students' minds, while also promoting the idea of civic engagement.
Thomas Jefferson wrote to Richard Price in 1789, stating, "Whenever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government." Promoting the idea of community service in the younger generations would be a great way to introduce them to this idea. Creating multiple opportunities through schools allows students to gain the benefits of civic engagement on their own and keep it as a willing endeavor, instead of potentially making it another assigned task. This way, students are attempting to participate in civic engagement in person rather than from behind a screen. That is all. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you. So one of the things that is the underlying issue of all this is common good, right? And if you could speak to what is the common good, and can the common good vary from city to city, state to state, or country to country?
We see that a lot in the state of South Dakota because our economy is so different than that of other states, and we don't have a large population. So for us, the common good might be to promote things for farmers or ranchers, whereas in a big city, you might promote something that would increase their online economy.
I think it's different across the country because of the vast size of our country and the differences in how people act, dress, do things in daily life, and even economic differences on both the coasts and the Midwest.
I think a really good current example would be the virus itself. We have more than half of our state without having a single case, so having our entire state shut down versus these bigger cities having to shut down is completely different, especially for our economy.
Yes, and I definitely agree that this situation has really affected it because, again, people are so different from area to area. So how this has affected it and other ways and other problems have affected people is so different.
Well, apparently there haven't been, I'm not sure about South Dakota, whether or not they have a governor's stay-at-home order, but there are many states that where the governors have issued a stay-at-home order, and I'm sure you've been reading about it in the newspaper. I want to ask you, or I will ask you, are those protesters against the governor's stay-at-home orders acting in an appropriate or inappropriate civic engagement? Be specific.
I believe that the protesters are acting in an inappropriate fashion based on the governor's protests. I believe that in this day and age, you can use your access to social media and those wide platforms to voice your same concerns towards governors and other politicians in your state, instead of potentially putting other people in harm's way and gathering in large crowds.
You can see You can see states like Georgia where they're highly protesting and their numbers may be more than the state of South Dakota. So by doing that, they're putting themselves out there to get sick, but they are also taking advantage of their ability to voice their concerns and try to make a difference.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say. I agree with both of them, but it's kind of hard to, however, punish them. I don't think that's the right word, but to act against them as they're really just putting their voice out there and having their right to speech.
Since all of you are high school right now, obviously, and the Birmingham protests were kids your age that were prepared to be nonviolent, yet also prepared to have violence done upon them. They walked into that park knowing they might be chewed by a dog, they might be hit by a fire hose, they could get hurt, they could die. So at your age, what in your mind would put you in that position to say, I'm going to be civil disobedient for this cause and willing to walk into that park? Is there anything out there right now in your mind?
You could maybe relate that some people would be willing to do that for our environment right now, but a lot of the times people our age are finding that it's easier to use social media, even though it might not be as effective or it might not gain as much social capital. And so you could say that people might want to do that for the environment, but a lot of the times they're going to try to find an easier way to get their voice heard.
I think for us it's harder too, because we saw with movements like this one, these kids grew up with their parents going to church and seeing their parents doing it, and that's just what they felt was right. Whereas for us, most of us don't really have that. We don't see that in our parents and take it upon ourselves when we don't see it through them.
I agree with Hannah, and during this time, they had been informed on these situations and lived through these. And I think right now, in America, from my experience, there is nothing really that I've lived through or that is affecting me in a great manner that I would, be willing to put my life and possibly other reputations at risk for. But I do see that something could possibly come up in the future, but we don't know what that is yet.
And again, I feel like today we have social media to voice those concerns. So back then they really didn't have that, and they saw their parents trying to make a change. So I guess they were just trying to, make a change.
Then the protesters that's going on right now for COVID-19, many of them are standing on state capitals, and they're holding AK-47 guns and wondering, what does that mean? Is the gun there just to say, I have a right, the Second Amendment, I'm going to show you that I have that right? Or are they telegraphing to us the potential that if I don't get what I want, I'm willing to resort to violence? What's your take on that? And do you ever see a need to resort to violence to solve an issue of civil disobedience?
I believe that the Birmingham situation with the Children's March shows that you do not have to resort to violence to get your voice heard.
Please finish your thought.
I believe that you don't need the gun and resorting to violence in this fashion. I think that having the gun does show that you have your rights as a person in this country, and I think it's just another example as their freedom of speech and being there.
Okay. Very good.
I thought y'all did a nice job. I think I certainly appreciate your use of local examples and bringing it back home to your home state. I think that's particularly impactful for the judges. I also appreciated your use of economic terminology, which demonstrates to us that you're really thinking about these things. For example, social capital, and that might be different than somebody physically being present and physically subjecting themselves to physical harm. So I thought you did a nice job. I certainly appreciate your presentation, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I too enjoyed your presentation. I always like it when students relate the question and the issues and topics to their local issues and topics. I mean, obviously we do expect you to be aware of local issues and topics. Your reference to your HB 1057, we have something similar to like that in Idaho, and those kinds of issues are local, but yet they're nationwide issues. I appreciate your answers to the cross-examination questions. They are difficult. These are difficult issues and difficult questions that we gave you. Thought you handled them fairly well. While yes, South Dakota is a small state, but I think each of you realize that you're a member of the nation, you're a member of the global community, and there will be issues that we feel, or I feel, that you will become passionate about and be willing to go out and engage in what I consider heavy-duty civic engagement. Because of your commitment to this program and the study of the Constitution, I'm confident that you will lead among your youth. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I too would like to mirror wonderful conversation and loved hearing your perspectives and your thoughts on things. Would have liked to have pressed a little bit further on what type of civil discourse would lead you into certain directions, whether they're nonviolent or maybe even violence. My next set of questions probably would have taken it into the realm of what would happen if in your state you are having massive mortgage failures for farms or ranches, and what that could do to the citizenry there, in terms of common welfare or the need for governmental change. But I think I know where you would have gone there, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I just would like to say to all those parents either hiding behind the computer or have their ears to the door or looking through the window or whatever the case may be, thank you for the support of your children here and supporting our future generation that will lead this country. And to their teacher, thank you for continuing this in this time of difficulty. Good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.